see your picture though, but I know you look pretty in person. Um, so you guys who are here, and some of you who just ran off to go get a drink of water or whatever, I want you to know that this time is a time for you to be as cozy and as comfortable as you want. You can join from bed, you can join from the car, you can, Tina, you can join from wherever you are. That's fine with me. You don't have to get all, I didn't really put makeup on for you or anything like that. So I just want us to be comfortable and be cozy and talk about the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And so some of you have been with me before, and that's great. And some of you on here might not know exactly what this is that I'm referring to. So let me back up and tell you why I'm so passionate about them. Before I even took my yoga teacher training, I was thinking, I want to go to India to do my yoga teacher training. I want to go right to the source. And that's what was in my head. Of course, I had two young kids at the time, and that wasn't going to be practical. And the teacher training that came up that I jumped on was one that was offered during. Hi, Joe, you made it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting your flow.
No, don't
All right.
interrupt my flow. We just got started. Thanks, Jack,
Have
for helping
fun.
your mom. All right. I'm glad you're here, Joe. So I just started chatting, and I was starting with why I'm so passionate about the Yoga Sutra. So I'm going to ask you guys to mute yourself. I will give you an opportunity. Mute is the icon at the bottom. It says mute. If you just click on that, then if you cough or things like that, we won't hear you. And then I do want to give you an opportunity to ask questions and things like that, and I'll just ask you to unmute yourself. So this text, the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, is something they taught during my yoga teacher training. And it really is the source. It is that source that I was really yearning for and longing for. It was written like 2,500 years ago by a guy whose name is Patanjali. He is not the person who invented yoga. He didn't create these teachings. He's just a guy who wrote them down, again, 2,500 years ago. I don't know, maybe it was when they finally figured out how to use bark or leaves as something to write on. But these teachings existed long before that. So these are ancient teachings. But he wrote them down. And since he was writing on bark or leaves, I'm not sure which, it is a very abbreviated style of writing. So it's not like poetry. It's not like an epic saga. They're very abbreviated. And so that they could be memorized, because back then, 2,500 years ago, they didn't have printing presses, and you couldn't all have a copy of a book. So his style is written in such an abbreviated form that it helps to have commentary go along with it. So you could find a book that just takes these words that were written in Sanskrit and translates them into English and kind of forms a sentence, which the book that I want to give you, Joe, that's pretty much what it is. It's very abbreviated, but it doesn't provide a lot of the context of what he's trying to say and what he means. And so there are many different texts. There are many different texts that provide commentary to his Yoga Sutras. Let me back up a bit. So when he wrote them, and the word sutra, it comes from the word suture. So these verses are numbered, and these verses are sewn together somehow, right? So that created like this little booklet. And these verses are numbered. And so again, they could be recited, they could be memorized. And there are there are 4 chapters, and there are about 50 verses per chapter. So there are many different texts that exist now that were written by scholars or gurus, and spiritual teachers who've studied the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and they have written books that provide the commentary to them. And all of these different texts, of which there are many, have the verses numbered in them. And so I'm telling you that because some of you probably don't have a text yet. Raise your hand if you don't have a text yet, and that's totally okay. All right. Yeah. So it's fine, because the first question I get is, what's the book and what page number are we on? And there are many different books, is the point there. And I think it's fun that in the different texts, and there is different commentary, we can study each verse and get to say, oh, Deb, what does Swami Satchidananda have to say about it? Etc. So I have some, so we'll talk a little bit about my recommendations. We'll talk a little bit about that. It's fine, again, if you don't have a text, and Karen knows many times people have joined this sutra group and they didn't even read, or they didn't even get a book. They just wanted to listen to the teachings, and I'm totally okay with that too. And as I was saying, when I first popped on, why I'm so passionate about it. I'm so passionate about it because when I went through my yoga teacher training, it was a time when, as I said, I had young kids. I think my daughter was like 11 and my son was 8. And one of them in particular was going through a really hard time. I mean, those are kind of hard years. And we got this child, who I'll let them remain anonymous right now, but we got them a lot of help. And when we got them the help that they needed, one of the things that was like teaching life coping skills is so helpful when you're going through hard things, right? So I read this text and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is life coping skills. Why haven't I heard of this before? I've been taking yoga for years, and why aren't they teaching this in schools to everyone? And I still am blown away to this day that yoga studios are on every corner in every town in the States. And yet we don't talk that much about these teachings. These are not teachings of the physical practice of yoga. We are not going to talk about downward facing dog and the proper alignment for triangle. It's more of a mind exercise than anything else. And Sri Patanjali, he was also known as a bit of a Sanskrit scholar and very well versed in Ayurveda. So Ayurveda, thinking of it as like a sister to yoga. And when I say in quotes yoga, I'm talking about the yoga from back there in India 2,500 years ago. But Ayurveda really translates to the science of longevity. And yoga, I've heard as they try to describe what yoga really is, because you may have gone to yoga classes and heard the teacher say, there's a lot more to yoga than the physical practice of yoga. And you might have wondered, what is it that they're talking about? What is a lot more than the physical practice of yoga? And this is where you'll find that information. It's right here in this text. He came up with the 8 limbs of yoga, which you will hear talked about in yoga classes. And that includes the yamas and the niyamas, which is definitely yoga that doesn't happen on a mat. So we'll cover that. Let's see, what else did I want to say? Any questions so far? If you have any questions so far, go ahead and unmute yourself. I know I'm throwing a lot out there. So again, when I was reading this text and I thought it was so profound, one of the things I loved about it is it's just very straightforward. Edwin Bryant, who is the scholar of the Yoga Sutras that exist today, I think he teaches at Harvard or some university. He teaches Sanskrit and yoga philosophy. He says that sutra, the style of writing of a sutra, is like a manual. And that made me laugh when I heard him say that, because I thought, that's how I've described it in the past. It's like a how-to manual, like a how-to for dummies, like how to get through the shitstorm of life for dummies. It's just very direct. It's tips and tricks that will help you when you are, coming across those bumps. And it's not like the Bhagavad Gita, which is you have to like read through the lines to understand what the teachings are. So as I said, there are many versions of it, and I want to just give you some guidelines on which one you might want to invest in. Again, there are very abbreviated versions. The one that I left there for you, Joe, I don't really remember the name of it. I think it's called Integrated Yoga Sutras. But the next one, well, this one by Swami Vivekananda, it's Raja Yoga, and then I just ordered another. It's just, if you find Yoga Sutras by Patanjali by Swami Vivekananda, that one, it's just basically the translation. There's not a lot of commentary. So if you're looking for something that's so basic, there's that. But the book that I would recommend over that is the one, Deb, that you had. Can you hold that up again? That is the most common one that is taught in the teacher trainings. There you go. That's better. And it's Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It is, can you lift it up? It's by Swami Satchidananda, and it's usually found in a blue cover. He covers the first 2 chapters, and then he kind of just summarizes the second 2 chapters. So that's a good one to start with. You can read that in like a long weekend. This one is my favorite, as you can tell, because it's falling apart. It's called Inside the Yoga Sutras by Reverend Jagannath Carrera. I keep trying to buy another one and see what someone else has to say, but I keep going back to that one because I love the teaching so much. And for local folks, well, for everybody, I mean, the easiest way to do it is buy these off Amazon. And I'm just suggesting you buy one. I'm not suggesting you buy all of the ones I'm talking about, but Amazon's the easiest. I hate to say, I have gone to a lot of the bookstores here in Marin. Copperfields doesn't carry these, except if you're local, the Novato store. I did have them order 3 of Inside the Yoga Sutras by Reverend Jagannath Carrera because it's my favorite, and it was available for them to get by this Wednesday. And so otherwise, if you're not local, just Amazon is the way to go. Edwin Bryant, he is like the person I mentioned. He's a scholar. He's teaching this stuff. I took a workshop of his. He's the only one I know who is actually doing anything like an online class. He taught a workshop, I think, at Sukas at one point years ago, but I don't really recommend his online course. It's very, he's got so much information in his head. And as you can see, this book is very thick. It goes into history. I still haven't been able to get through this one yet. Iyengar writes a book on it. So Iyengar wrote, what did he write? Light on Yoga, but this is Light on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Again, I'm just getting into this one. I just ordered it. And then I will say this now, that yoga and Buddhism are not the same thing, though you go into a yoga studio and you'll see an image of a Buddha. The teachings, a lot of them are similar. There is a lot of crossover. They come from the same part of the world. And, the Buddha was born as someone with more of a yogic philosophy, in a family with a yogic philosophy. And then he went and did his thing and came up with his teachings. But here is one for someone who kind of comes from that angle of, is more immersed in the Buddhist tradition. Somebody who was a student last time round, who is definitely well-studied Buddhist, had this version. It doesn't resonate with me as much. So again, that's a lot on the text, and I I'm totally open to questions because I know that's kind of confusing because we're going to do the study group and yet we might all have different books. So any questions on that? No? Okay. All right. Well, so this text that is defining yoga, it is referred to as the text that defines yoga and written so many years ago. Let's get into it. So the first verse of the Yoga Sutras, verse 1 is, gosh, now I don't know which text to pick up because I love them all. So I'm going to start with my tried and true favorite. It's Atta Yoga Anushasanam. Atta Yoga Anushasanam means, well, Atta means now. So now yoga, and Anushasanam is the exposition of yoga. Sometimes I've heard it defined, or the study of yoga. So the very first line says, now the study of yoga. It's kind of like a heading, a calling, just a title. Edwin Bryant says that somewhere in this word, Anushasanam, it also has this connotation of continuation, a continuation of the study. So this is probably for his students they know what yoga is already. He also says, well, maybe it could be, now you're ready for the study of yoga. Like this comes from a tradition where they believe in reincarnation. So it's like, now that you're in the human form, after having been an ant and an inchworm and an iguana, now you're in the human form. Now you're ready for this thing called yoga. The idea there being one of the reasons why we focus within this text, taking care of the physical body is definitely part of it, and why we might want to take care of the physical body, because we want to see how far we can achieve that spiritual growth in this one lifetime. Because in this text, it does say you can come back where you left off in your next life, but let's see how far we can go to achieve as much spiritual growth as we can in this lifetime. So I'll read a little bit about this first verse in my favorite book, the book of Reverend Jagannath Carreras. It says, now, not later, not soon, now. If we wish to understand the principles of yoga, our minds can't be bogged down in the past or fretting about the future. With all other concerns at least temporarily put aside, our minds are free to be completely in the moment. The ability to focus attention is an important requisite in all areas of learning, but especially in spiritual matters, which contain subtle philosophical observations. So that brings up something that I have also heard in from people who have been studying the Yoga Sutras. It's like, it's pretty darn profound that the very first word of this text is now, because I have studied it a lot, and a lot of what you can gain from these teachings is just to be in the present moment. Just be in the now and be in the present moment. Like Ram Dass was actually really a student of the stuff we're talking about, the real deeper meaning yoga stuff. And he wrote that book, Be Here Now, right? So I would like to just, I often start my classes when I teach yoga, the physical practice of yoga, that is, of let's just drop into the present moment. We spend so much time not in the present moment. Our minds, and this is why it's called mind science. So it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do, to be in the present moment. It's an exercise. We have to strengthen that part, that ability. It's like doing the physical practice of yoga. Doing a chaturanga is hard, but you go in there and you do baby steps, right? Until you can get it. Think about how much time you spend thinking about the past and kind of revisiting traumas that you've had in the past. And then what does that do to your mind? First of all, the more we have thoughts, then the more we're going to repeat, and those thoughts are going to become habits, and we're going to repeat those thoughts over and over and over. But reliving trauma over and over, or experiences that bring you into sadness, I mean, that's going to lead to depression. So again, this is mind science. How much time do you spend worrying about stuff that may or may not happen in the future? Or even just trying to plan. I mean, sometimes I could be in a beautiful place I was on a walk with my husband in Stinson Beach, and it was so gorgeous. And I had the very stressful board meeting coming up. And I just realized after like 45 minutes, I wasn't even there on that walk. I wasn't present. I was just totally thinking about all these things. In the board meeting, I thought, God, what a waste, you know? But anyway, and can we just talk about being a parent? Anyone here a parent? I feel like it was my job to be worried. Like, it was my job to think of all the very worst possible things that could possibly happen to my children when, you know, my 8-year-old son wanted to go on a bike ride across town or something. But you get too much into that space, and that can lead to anxiety, right? So mind science is what we're talking about here. And I think it's pretty profound just to kind of pause and say, wow, the first word of this text is now. And maybe they didn't intend to say anything except just kind of call everyone together right now. But maybe there is something there. So I'm going to read on again in this text and see what he has to say about this first verse. Atta, translated as now, implies Sri Patanjali's fitness or authority to teach. He is calling the class to order, so to speak. Only a qualified teacher would do so. And then Anushasanam means exposition, or it could mean the study of, and some of these other texts define it in different ways. Let me see what Iyengar's book has to say on it. He says instruction. He says, this is now in Iyengar's book, Patanjali is the first to offer us a codification of yoga. He's the first to kind of organize this. If you think of like putting in an outline, kind of organizing these teachings that already exist before. The immediacy of the new light he is shedding on a known and ancient subject is emphasized by his use of the word now. His reappraisal, based on his own experience, explores fresh ground and bequeaths us a lasting monumental work. In the cultural context of his time, his words must have been crystal clear, and even to the spiritually impoverished modern mind, they are never confused, although they are often almost impenetrably condensed. So again, that they're condensed. They're written in such an abbreviated form. It's helpful to meditate on it. It's helpful to have people who have studied this for a long period of time provide some commentary to it. So there's other sutras, like there's the Brahma Sutra, and the Brahma Sutra also begins with the word now. The yoga, in this text, he says, yoga is considered to be a subjective art, science, and philosophy. All of those things as one. So that's kind of defining the word yoga. Let's see, going back to Reverend Jagannath Carrera's book. It is apparent that Sri Patanjali was not claiming that his was a new teaching, but rather that it was an explanation of what had been taught before. So then we get to the second verse of the first chapter. And so the verses are numbered. The first chapter, it's always going to begin with a 1, and then it has point. So I just read 1.1, Atta Yoga Anushasanam. The second verse is going to be 1.2. And this is really the big one, you guys. This is it. He just right away is going to define yoga. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha means yoga is the cessation to the fluctuations of the mind. Another way to say that is yoga is quieting the mind. Yoga is stilling the mind. Yoga is the cessation. Nirodha means cessation. So it's stopping, restraining. The vrittis, vritti literally means whirling, twirling. And have you ever tried to follow your thoughts and notice how they're just, well, for me, I when I think of this, I think of a pinball machine, your thoughts going just ding, 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 here, there, and everywhere. And it's noisy and it's hard to restrain them. Let me get into what Reverend Jagannath Pereira has to say, because he's got a lot to say in this verse. This sutra alone could form the basis of a lifetime of contemplation and practice. So I'm glad I'm probably going to just end with this one today, because there's a lot to go through. Let's first define the word yoga. Some of you might have heard yoga means union. Has anyone heard that referred to? And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on what that union means. There is no right or wrong answer. But union of what? Tina, are you unmuting?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll go. I think, and I'm just like guessing here, I think it's the union of the body and the mind, a body-mind connection.
I hear that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, no right or wrong, but oh, someone's got some background noise. Maybe you could mute. So, okay, it refers to the act of yoking in common usage. It refers to, it's like the harnessing of an animal to a cart. But that's just the word, the root of that word. The word applied to the control of the senses. So you could think of harnessing the power of a concentrated mind. So if instead of the wild horses of your mind running off in all different directions, kind of having this harness to have some control over those thoughts, the horses being your thoughts. That's one way to think of it. And I've often heard my teachers refer to it, and when I meditated on this a lot, I came up with this. Yoga unites us to all living things and to that which is bigger than ourselves. That's what I came up with. My teachers would say, yoga unites you to your highest, truest self. So let's see what Reverend Jagannath Pereira has to say. Yoga is also used to refer to the essential union or oneness of the individual with the self, true self. We don't have to limit our understanding of this word to any one definition. Why not include them all, just as we value a gemstone for the way each facet reflects light? Each meaning adds breadth and depth to our understanding of the term. So another reason I like to have all of these different texts and all of these different wise people providing their commentary, because something might resonate with me that, you might have something else that really resonates with you. So chitta is the mind stuff. The mind in its totality. It's your consciousness and your subconscious and your unconscious. It's all the mind stuff. They say the Sanskrit words, the manas, the buddhi, and the ahamkaras. So before you unite, though, I also, like in meditation came up with this thought. I think you have to disconnect with something first. And that's the ego self. So you have to kind of disconnect with the concept that you're really, you're made up of what your job title is and how much money you have in your bank account and where you live and how many kids you have and all of those things. We have to kind of disconnect first before we can connect with the truer self. And we'll get into that some more too. So the ego stakes out the borders of self-identity and then exerts effort to maintain and strengthen it while avoiding anything it regards as threatening or unpleasant. It is as a level of ego that suffering arises. The ego prevents us from perceiving the true identity. It harbors expectations and cravings. It becomes frightened, insecure, angry, and envious. It really can build that sense of separateness. So enlightenment requires transcending the ego. So the ego is very talking to us all the time and telling us all these things. We have to do this and that and be better at this and that and achieve, in order to, I don't know, be satisfied. So the ego is a lot of the noise in our head that we're trying to quiet. We're not at the third verse, which tells us why we would want to do this in the first place. So I don't want to jump ahead. The definition of vritis here in this text says, it's literally to whirl. Doesn't it sound like that, the word vriti? It's literally to whirl, turn, revolve, go round and round. It's a colorful term that suggests an incessant and maybe dizzying movement. Vriti activity is the mind's attempt at making sense of all the experiences it encounters. We kind of need that vriti. We need to make sense of the world that we're living in, which is kind of crazy. This outside stimulus rouses the senses, which brings the resulting impressions into the mind. The mind takes that solitary thought and begins a tornado-like dance, rapidly weaving together webs of thoughts in a frenetic search for other related thoughts, comparing, contrasting, and categorizing. Right now, your mind is attempting to find relationship between this new information regarding vritis and any past experiences that seem to have connection with it. The mind naturally seeks to make sense. Vritti activity creates our reality, our world, our family, our self-identity. We are the weavers who spin the realities of our lives. It reminds me of that song by, what is the name? Trevor Hall. Someone who I also love to have on my Spotify list is Janet Stone, and she sings a version of it too, Old Stories. Talking about the old stories, we constantly have these old stories that we tell ourselves in our head. And where do they come from? They come from our past experiences. So all of our past experiences are coloring what's going on in the now if we allow that chatter to continue. Vritti activities create filters that can distort perception. However, the truth does peek through our mental constructs when vritti activity stops or winds down. By obscuring power of whirling vrittis, the real trouble comes when we identify with the stories that we've created in our mind. Identification with vritti activity obscures our experiences of our true self. It takes us away from the objective truth of pure experience and involves us in this drama of the mind. And we forget our true identity and mistake that this body, this experience, this temporary experiences is just more limiting than it actually is. So I'd like to take a moment here and that's a lot to take in right now already. So I want you to, wherever you are, let's practice first. Let's practice trying to be in the present moment. Close your eyes. And again, it's not that easy. It's not that easy to be in the present moment. So whatever happens, no judgment. And one way to tap into the present moment is to just feel. Feel gravity. There's a part of your body that is on something. Notice the parts that are touching that support and the weight of it all. Closing your eyes to shut out that external, because we spend a lot of time there with the visual external, and just taking a moment to just notice anything going on in your body. Again, no judgment. Maybe there's a little discomfort somewhere from sitting where you are or lying down where you are. And maybe something feels very cozy. Hopefully you're in your comfortable clothes. And there's the temperature of the air on your skin and sounds, maybe sounds other than my voice just going on around you. Maybe with your mouth gently closed. There's just a taste there in your mouth, sensation of something. And as you breathe in through the nose, maybe you have some experience of a smell. But for sure, when you breathe in through the nose, I want you to feel the air enter through your nostrils. As you exhale, whether through your mouth or your nose, just try to relax and soften some part of your body somewhere. As you breathe through the nose, see where the breath goes and how it feels to fill up. And then that letting go, relaxing, tension somewhere. And now I'm going to stop talking and just kind of continue with that. Just feel and try to be in the present moment. Just one more breath, feeling it fully. Let's open our eyes again. And so, yeah, Tina, I want to say to you that I think that is a good entrance into this concept of being present. This is why I love the physical practice of yoga, even though I'm here to say the physical practice of yoga, Patanjali doesn't talk about this in this text. And this is a text that defines yoga. But yeah, asana, the physical practice of yoga is one of the 8 limbs of yoga, and I teach it. So I love it. I'm all about it. And what it does for me is it does help me get out of my head and into my body, if at least for an hour. And if I can just be, and even if you go to a yoga class and you're injured and you can't do very much and you just sit on your mat and you breathe, just to spend that time just out of your head and into your body, in your body, feeling can kind of draw you into the present moment. So your answer, Tina, is right. And I also think there's these other definitions too to think about and to ponder. And it's a tip and a trick. Again, as I said, this book is full of them, just to utilize the senses. Later, we will talk about how to turn off the senses, but for now, to utilize the senses to be present. And this concept of, I don't know if it seems strange to you, of like, wait, why would we want to quiet the mind or stop the mind? It's not stop the mind from thinking. We don't want to stop you from being able to think and reason and those things. It's to stop the fluctuations of the mind that you don't have control over. And again, if each thought you have is kind of creating this groove in your brain. Let's see, Deb, I think you're a mountain bike rider. So imagine you go on these mountain bike trails and, it's every time a bike goes through the trail, it kind of creates this groove. And so the next time you go on the trail, your tire kind of wants to slide right back into that same groove. And so your thoughts, you're like continually, we kind of have these same thoughts over and over, and we wonder why we have these similar experiences, and we keep running into tripping over the same stuff in our life. And even maybe, and we'll get into, the samskaras and the karma that happens with them. We can kind of keep finding ourselves, and even from one life to the next, maybe going through the same thing. Well, how do we undo that? How do you unwind that? It's like I have Calm on my phone, and occasionally one of the sayings that comes up is, what is it? The broom meditation is the broom to the cobwebs of the mind, or something like that. But how do you polish away these grooves on that trail? Or imagine an ice skating rink, every once in a while everybody has to clear the ice, and a machine goes around and kind of smooths everything out so you don't keep tripping over those grooves that were created in the ice. So basically, meditation is the thing that polishes that away, polishes those grooves away, so you can have clearer thoughts. So that's the concept I want to leave you with. I'm going to try very hard to keep this at 45 minutes. I don't want it to be a full hour. I want you guys to spend some time afterwards just contemplating, and totally open for questions. Anybody, anything, unmute yourself and we can chat away.
I have one, not a question, but this is Lyanne. I have this book by I can't pronounce his last name, just Jessica Char.
Jessica Char, okay.
And
I don't have that one, but do you have the numbered verses there?
Yeah, and it's very little interpretation. It's basically just what he's saying is how Patanjali defines it. And so his statement for this 1.2, I'm trying to wrap it around what the other things that you've just said. It says yoga is the ability to direct the mind exclusively towards an object and sustain that direction without any distractions. And the object can be a concept. It's not necessarily a thing. But so at first I thought that was kind of like not what you were saying, but it is. It's that, because then when you're talking about the twirling and spinning, this is about how to, or trying to, the ability, yoga is the ability to stop that.
Yeah, and so think of it, we can't have no thoughts, right? But if you can have one thought, then it's not a pinball machine effect going on. If you can just focus on one thought, and that's difficult too. And maybe we'll start next week by trying to do that. Just have one thought. And again, what we just did when we closed our eyes, we were having maybe a variety of thoughts as you were focusing on your senses and you were feeling. But yeah, to have just one thought. So a lot of it is just focus on one thing. there's something that comes after that, a deeper level of meditation that is the 8th of the 8 limbs of yoga, which is in here too, and we'll get to that. But I like that he described that way. All the other texts, they don't really describe it that way. I think the book that I left for you, Joe, it does sort of say something like that. Like when I read it, I was like, oh, I usually don't think of it like that. But to me, that's not different. He just kind of elaborated on it a bit. So yes, any comments also, or if anyone read something in their book that they thought was unique and different and wanted to share.
I ordered the other one while you were talking at the beginning. I ordered the one that you recommended.
Well, not from Amazon.
No, from Powell. I got it from Powell.
She told me just the other day.
I'm an
She
anti-Amazon.
ended up ordering from Amazon. Yeah. Yeah, so fun stuff, a lot of good stuff. This was a bit of an overview of what it is. I'm glad you're all here. I think it's so interesting and profound. These first 4 sutras, we only got to 1 and 2. Oh, we'll move faster, by the way. We're not going to be here for 200 weeks. But the first 4 are really profound and worth kind of spending some time on, and then we can move a little bit faster. Just so you know that when I went through my yoga teacher training, we started in chapter 2. So it doesn't matter if you don't make all of these and you pop on and you pop off. I mean, it's great stuff. So I hope you do, but the teachings wherever we are lovely and profound. So yeah.
Kristen, I was wondering if there was something you said that had come up for you in meditation about yoga uniting, and you said yoga unites, what was it, with all living beings? What was that
Well, for
statement?
me, it was like, sitting in a seated meditation pose and feeling like, okay, I have roots from my root growing down, 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 connecting me to all living things. And then also connecting me to something bigger than myself. So
Yeah.
I just feel like there's this channel of both, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's something that came from me.
No, I really liked it. So I just wanted to hear it again.
Yeah. But we're trying to connect to our truest self, our highest self, and being on this planet in this crazy world, whew, it's a lot to disconnect us. So just random thought, Jenny, who came with me to Vietnam and Cambodia, it was a 10-day trip. And so we had a lot of time on our buses. And so we went over the yamas and the niyamas, because there are 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. So while we were in the buses, we talked about the yamas and the niyamas, and that was kind of fun, huh?
It was great. And how you tied in stories, it was wonderful.
Yeah, good. So we'll get to that too, Joe. I know you're a fan of that. All right. Good to see you all. Go have a great Monday evening. And I look forward to seeing you next week. We'll keep it short and sweet each week, okay? All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Bye. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I like your tire track analogy.
Yeah. Are you a bike rider too?
Yes,
Well, thanks for
very
joining,
good.
Carl. All right. We'll see
Thank
you.
you. See you
Okay,
next week.
take care. Yeah. Bye-bye.